Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining us here today at our Consolidated Forensics Laboratory. And you have been here before and recognized that this is a cutting-edge facility which houses several agencies, including our Department of Forensic Sciences. I'm joined by Deputy Mayor Kevin Donahue, DFS Director Jennifer Smith, and Assistant Chief Robert Conti of the Metropolitan Police Department. We're here, of course, to talk about all of our efforts to make D.C. a safer and stronger community. And I want to remind everyone who knows or has any information leading to the arrest of someone responsible for violent crime in the city, especially homicide, to contact us. There is a reward of $25,000 to anyone that provides information which leads to the arrest and conviction of a person or people responsible for any homicide committed in the District of Columbia. We are urging residents with information about any case in the district, any pending case, to call us at 202-727-9099, or you may text us or submit information anonymously by sending a text to 50411. Gun violence, as we know, has waged by individuals with illegal guns, continues to tear communities apart. In addition to residents, we also know that MPD officers have been shot at and one officer hit recently. We are grateful to our officers for putting their lives on the line each and every day to protect our communities. As I said last week, my administration will continue investing in preventing violence before it happens. We continue to invest in and support MPD, and we will also continue investing in resources and programs that help our residents heal from trauma, the trauma that they have experienced. Part of this commitment is ensuring that we are doubling down on the programs and strategies that yield results. And that's why we're here today at our crime lab. The Department of Forensic Sciences is an independent full-service forensics laboratory that supports investigators in homicides and violent crimes in D.C. The agency provides services to MPD as well as numerous other local, federal law enforcement and investigative agencies. The DFS Firearms Examination Unit receives all firearms collected in the district and uses the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, also known as NIBIN, to help generate leads in shooting-related investigations. As of August of this year, it's an important point, FEU has test-fired 2,017 firearms and has entered 3,819 cartridge casings into the NIBIN system. And from FY17 to FY18, the firearms unit increased the number of lead confirmations by over 200%. Since 2017, DFS has worked with MPD to establish the Criminal Gun Information Center as an effort to identify and correlate the use of guns in criminal incidents in D.C. By conducting these forensic examinations on guns, shell casings, and other forensic evidence following the firing of a weapon, we can identify what guns are associated with what incidences. The criminal gun information was initiated in MPD's 7th District, which encompasses most of Ward 8. But today, we're announcing that with additional funding in the FY20 budget, the program will expand to include the 6th District encompassing Ward 7. We are also hiring 4 additional firearms investigators to study shell casings and other gun-related forensic evidence. These investments will help us close cases more quickly and ensure that investigators have the evidence and data they need to hold criminals responsible for gun-related crimes. We already know that guns in the hands of the wrong people make our community less safe, and we need to get illegal guns out of our community. And what DFS and MPD have worked on in the 7th District, we know will prove very useful in more areas of the district and help close more cases. So I'm going to invite Dr. Smith to come to the podium and say a little bit more about the work of our firearms unit.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. Welcome, everyone, to the Consolidated Forensic Laboratory and to the Department of Forensic Sciences. As the mayor stated, DFS is an independent, full-service forensic laboratory that supports investigations in homicides and violent crimes. For her entire tenure, Mayor Bowser has been a proponent of strong forensic sciences and ensuring that this laboratory has the resources necessary to do our job, and today is no different. Our Crime Scene Sciences Division collects 24/7 evidence from crime scenes to include those involving firearms. We have a team in our Forensic Intelligence Unit who triage evidence to ensure the most probative items collected move forward for processing. But today we're here to talk specifically about probative evidence connected to gun violence and the use of illegal firearms. Beginning in FY17, DFS partnered with MPD, who had been awarded a Crime Gun Intelligence Center, or CGIC, federal grant to produce forensic intelligence through expanded and timely use of NIBIN. NIBIN is only one of 3 critical intelligence databases we use here at DFS. What we learned from this initiative was by increasing timeliness and expanding the types of offenses entered into NIBIN, DFS provided critical forensic intelligence concerning connections of weapons and crimes. Firearms collected by our crime scene scientists is brought to DFS by area law enforcement are test fired for function and operability. And then the resulting casings are entered into NIBIN for regional comparison. Additional casings collected from crime scenes or locations in the city are also entered into NIBIN. And the NIBIN system allows for information to be compared to other records and continual leads are generated. With additional resources, DFS was able to reduce the time of NIBIN entry upon agency receipt. DFS now test fires weapons within 1 business day and enters test fire information into NIBIN within 48 hours. NIBIN entry for casings collected from crime scenes was reduced from 7 days to 2 days. Also, DFS prioritized NIBIN entries of cartridge casings from nonviolent incidences like destruction of property or sounds of gunshots as part of this CGIC effort. This increased the number of connections or hits linking shootings-related incidences. In the first year, the CGIC initiative, DFS had 4,192 NIBIN entries, which resulted in 338 hits. Basically meaning that confirmed connections where the same firearm was used at more than 1 crime scene. In the second year, we entered 3,670 entries, and that yielded 834 hits, as the mayor said, a 200% increase in connections. Since August of this fiscal year, DFS has entered 3,819 NIBIN entries and generated 697 hits. Of the 2,017 firearms that were test fired since August of this year, 16% of those weapons were linked through NIBIN as having been used on more than 1 crime scene. NIBIN information can also be used by our Forensic Intelligence Unit to create resumes of these guns that were used multiple times throughout the city, whether the firearm has been recovered or not. Since August of this fiscal year, 54% of our NIBIN hits confirmed that the same firearm was used where no known firearm has yet been recovered. Mayor Bowser has now provided us with resources to continue this effort into FY20 as we hire 4 additional firearms personnel and expand collection and entry of casings from nonviolent offenses throughout the city. Ultimately, these resources will allow us to continue expanded use of the NIBIN system to provide investigators timely information and connections towards solving more homicides and violent crimes. Thank you.
Any questions? Questions?
I have some questions.
Yes.
So you were doing it in Ward 7, now you're expanding to Ward 8. So do you handle,
The other way.
or, okay, but so do you handle the way you do forensic testing on crimes differently in one part of the city than you do in, I mean, it sounds like that's the case. I mean, so what happens at a shooting in 3D or 2D?
So in essence, we respond to all the crime scenes. I think what the expansion actually is from these other types of sounds of gunshots or destruction of property. These are casings that were left in what are not necessarily crime scenes per se, but we respond to crime scenes across the city in the same way, and we handle the evidence the same way from all areas of the city. But this expansion gives us this information on this resume. In essence, it says this firearm was connected to or was shot and maybe shot at a trash can, as opposed to, or it was just shot up in the air, sounds of gunshots. Does that make sense? Versus, and then we find, oh, this was also connected to a crime, an actual scene. So this is the expansion of actually trying to collect casings from all over the city from a variety of events, not necessarily criminal offenses.
And then can I ask you, the mayor pointed to this 200% increase. So can you kind of, for the layman out there, tell people what that means?
So what happens is the more information we're getting in, right, the more we're feeding in the actual casings that are occurring, the more connections we're now making. So the better that the information is that's going in, we're now able to see these firearms. Even though we haven't recovered some of them, we're able to see how they're being used around the city. So that's important. Now, if a firearm is recovered and we do the test fire, we're also able to connect these to more scenes because we're actually putting in that crime scene evidence into the system or this additional evidence from other nonviolent incidences.
So if I understand this, so now you know there's a gun out there, right? Gun A, whatever gun that is, that's been used to shoot up a trash can over in this alley, maybe fire off some shots over in this neighborhood over here, and you can trace time and date and location to this gun without ever having this gun.
That's exactly right. And we can also connect it to other guns. Sometimes these guns then are involved together. So it's in essence looking at it more as what is the life of the gun, as opposed to just looking at it as each incident singularly.
Can you talk about how then linking those cases, if you say you have the trash can case and a shooting nearby, how linking those cases would help you find someone who was responsible for it?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you an example. For when we first started this initiative back in 2018, there was a firearm that was used in a homicide. We recovered the shell casings, went through the process that we normally do, entered that information into NIBIN, as Dr. Smith elaborated on, but we didn't have a body. We didn't have a gun. Sometime later, we found a shell casing, and we at another scene, as Mark indicated, again, but no body. But then when we locate the gun and a person with the gun or in possession of the weapon, we were able to tie that gun back to those scenes and ultimately to the homicide, which allowed us to close the case out. The other thing that it allows us to do, just kind of as an example, when you talk about firearms, a lot of our illegal firearms, as everyone knows, comes in from the state of Virginia. When we look at firearms and we're looking at the shell casings and we'll begin to understand the history of this firearm, we can then track back to see who purchased this firearm, if there was a straw purchase, for example, involved, and what is the life cycle, as Dr. Smith indicated, the life cycle of that gun. And it gives us pretty much the gun's DNA and allows us to look back at who's been in possession of the firearm. And it's an ultimate tool for the police department. Obviously not a silver bullet, but a great tool for us.
Any other questions?
Could I ask, Mayor Bowser, you had mentioned about police officers being shot at and shot. And I honestly don't know what the numbers are, but it feels like there have been more officer-involved shootings of late for one reason or another. What do you, and you applauded the officers who were putting themselves out there today. What do you say to the officers? And am I right? Maybe the chief can help us out with these numbers. Are officers being shot at more often now than in the past?
I will ask Chief Conte to respond to that, but I think we had an officer that took a bullet in his vest within the last 2 weeks. last week, and thankfully it was a hit to the vest and not to his chest. So my message to the officers is to continue to be safe out there, to engage and do the work that we expect. And we're, as a community, going to do all that we can to get these illegal guns off the street and find the people who are willing to so wantonly shoot off firearms. I think our point here today, as you heard from Dr. Smith, is that every shell casing that we find, whether related to a shooting or not, helps us find a shooter. And the ability to expand into more police districts to make sure we're entering that information into NIBIN helps us in the district, it helps us in the surrounding jurisdictions, and it will help us find guns and shooters. So this is very important work that we know that will pay off in the end. And it lets folks know that this wanton shooting will eventually connect us to them. And that's key here.
Can the chief follow up?
Yes.
If more officers are being shot at?
Yeah, I think, Mark, the thing that we have not seen, we had 3 incidents over the course of 7 days. And I don't think, in my almost 30 years with this department, I can't recall a time where we've had 3 incidents in 7 days. In each of these instances, I think it's important to note that these officers were specifically targeted and shot at. These were not random acts. These officers were specifically targeted for wearing a uniform, going out here and trying to protect the citizens of the District of Columbia. So to that, again, as much as this effort will help us to close violent crimes, any crimes that's committed against police officers as well, we look forward to this being another tool in our toolbox to help close those types of cases as well.
Mayor, quick question. Not obviously every shooting is fatal, but shootings can make communities feel very unsafe and people who live there feel very unsafe.
You better believe it.
How important is it into taking a huge step towards, more public safety, a safer feeling in this city? How much do these resources accomplish that or take a step forward towards that?
Well, as I mentioned, we think that every tool that we have to help connect us to a person who has a gun is going to help us. And entering this data, having the most data possible on firearms, shell casings in the NIBIN database helps all of our law enforcement officials and investigators when a crime does happen. So that will get us closer to where that gun and who has the gun, more importantly, is.
Off topic.
Off topic.
The $2 million grant for immigration services, can you tell us how that will help people here in the district?
Sure. We started, I guess it's been 3 years ago now, immigration justice legal services grants, where the district makes grants to nonprofit organizations that work with our immigrant communities and are trusted in the community, and provide our residents services so that they know their rights. They take advantage of programs that will allow them to become citizens and make sure that they have all of the resources available to them. So I think that we have over 20 organizations participating now.
And on another topic, I know you put out a statement about Mark Plotkin's passing.
Yes.
As you may be aware, one of his final requests was to lie in repose at the Wilson Building. It's been done before once to have a non-elected official lie in repose at the Berry. And I know it's not your decision, it rests with the council, but what would your message to the council be on this? What are your thoughts about fulfilling this last request for Mr. Plotkin?
Well, certainly we know that Mark was beloved by many. He was certainly a lover of D.C. politics and voting rights and statehood for D.C. residents, and had, as I understand it, a lot to do with the district owning and occupying the district's building, which will be our state capitol. So I do think it is. We as a city need to figure out a fitting memorial or fitting tribute to Mark, and I'm not sure what that is at this stage. Thank you.